Most people struggle to win games in mediocre and non-meta tanks, but today it's time to see how you can use the tips that these super unicums show and win more games yourself, so pay attention because there is a ton to learn. So the first replay that we do have is where it all starts to go a bit pear-shaped, and it is of course in a tank that is not necessarily a very good one, or at least in the most part this tank is pretty lackluster, the T54E1, but how can he pull it off to win the game and instantly from the beginning using all 4 shells to pick up 1600 damage and continue this to make a ridiculous result from where you would 100% not realise that it was possible. So the first thing that he does is, instead of just YOLOing straight through the central area on the left, on of course one of the newer maps, Oyster Bay, where you can get farmed from the left, he in fact uses this position to farm up opponents that are in the centre and of course camping in their base. Now he does get tracked, he uses that repair kit quickly and removes the Indian Panzer straight away, who is going to be the one that is able to spot him for all of the TDs that are going to be camping where this KPZ on the enemy team is. And of course a very well versed player here, 3 marks on the T54E1, knows exactly how this tank plays, and of course using the 4-shot autoload that this tank gets to really deal a ton of damage. But when you move up into this position you have potential to get side shot from here and of course anyone that's camping in the base, so making sure that you use the rocks in this location as you're seeing here is a super imperative thing for you to do, and of course allows him to be able to pick apart opponents that do find themselves in this location over here. Now what typically happens on this map, as you can see on the right of the T54E1, his team are getting absolutely pummeled by all of the heavy tanks that have gone down that central road and of course on the right hand side of the road on this flank, and that is really not great for this sort of playstyle and of course in this sort of tank, because as soon as you are fully clipped out, you've unloaded all of your shells, you are subject to be very much farmed by the opposite numbers. Now the 257 not pushing the advantage, T54 manages to take the full reload, and we'll jump back in a second. Hopefully you're enjoying the tips so far in today's video, and if you are, please think about subscribing, because that is what this channel is all about, just trying to showcase some of the best games and how you can use these tips to learn, get better, do more damage, or just be entertained. So hopefully you join, and of course like the video if you do. To make autoloaders work you really do have to continuously try and output the damage, which is where you've got to be somewhat that hybrid position where both you push but also don't push too hard. It's a very fine line between being caught in the open and farmed by the opponents, and of course this position right here is a little bit terrible at the moment, because of course if the KPZ moves up into this location here, you can get ass shots onto the T54, which no one likes, and of course then you are going to be subject to be YOLO'd by the Caliban, who is going to be looking to get that nice little HE round, or of course AP round, into you. Now he bounces the first one, Caliban has a little bit of a reload between the firing the next shell, but he does manage to shut him down after bouncing, and then he puts one into the 257 to secure this part of the map, and this is really where the game starts to become very much kind of clear that the T54E1 knows what he's doing. He's cleared out this flank, and that allows him, having removed the Indian Panzer who could have potentially spotted him here, to push here. Now of course pushing here opens yourself up to the people that are camping over here. The rock here is going to provide you a little bit of cover, but of course he uses that knowledge to make sure not to push too far or too slow to the point where he's going to be getting farmed. Now he gets spotted, which means that there's most likely someone in this bush over here, or potentially hiding in a bush somewhere close. Now he is getting hit by the side by of course the KPZ on the enemy team, and of course now finds himself in a bit of a sticky situation against the BZ, who is not possible to clip out the entirety of. Now he's on just 200 hit points, but with the luck of the Americans he does manage to set him on fire and somehow finishes him off, even though it was definitely not on within this game, picking up 7,000 damage and really securing this flank from all of the opponents that are going to be pushing. And it also gives him the opportunity to get ass shots onto the people that are holding up his team, like the Torn Vang and of course the like on his team. So there's the TNH, the IS-3, and this location right here is perfect. He now gets this rock to avoid being shot in the backside, has to be a little bit careful though, but in doing so, he now has the opportunity to push up. The enemy team either have to turn for him, or they have to, you know, expose themselves to the back end of this T-54A1, which is, of course, is not going to go well. The TNH decides to turn for him, and he places a few rounds after the artillery hits him for just lower his hit points enough such that he can finish him off and pick up 8,700 damage, which is a fantastic result in a tank that definitely, and I mean definitely, is an underdog within World of Tanks. This tank is usually not the best within the game, but of course with such a high alpha damage and the T-57 heavy kind of precursor in the game, it is a strong one if you can use it correctly. Now he does go up into the bushes over here. There is of course an SU over here. There's of course the KPZ that was there, but in doing so he puts this rock in between him and he's able to get some free shots hopefully onto the opponents like the Barras. Now the Barras has fired one at the Emil. He could potentially still have one in the mag, but of course he stays hidden, tries not to get hit from the left hand side, and he's just pre-aiming now the Barras. Now Barras is using the rock as you probably should be, but he is now in a bit of a sticky situation in terms of where he's positioned now, because if he exposes himself to T-51, he's going to be getting clipped. If he exposes himself to the team who are sat here, it's going to be curtains for him. So he can't really do anything, can't poke, he is just basically spotting for his team. Normally players will try to overcommit, but luckily for the T-54A1, because he has the autoloader, it gives him the opportunity to try and connect that shot into the Barras, and there you go. He shuts him down, avoiding being spotted now because of the fact that the Barras is going to be removed. He's not going to be able to get easily spotted, and it allows him to play a little bit more how he wants to play, as opposed to just constantly being spotted and potentially being hit by the TDs. He can then pull back behind the bushes potentially, or just poke them when he sees that they fired, and that just gives him the opportunity to deal even more damage in a game where he's picked up 8,800. Yeah, this is a very, very good result, and it's been played very well. There was a bit of luck involved, obviously, but of course in these top replays it usually does involve a little bit of luck along with a massive amount of skill to pull off results like this. And there you go, 2 in to the KPZ, finishing him off 9,400 damage. So obviously when you're in this sort of position, you want to make sure that you do pre-aim where you think that the enemies are going to be, so you can get even more damage, and luckily he does that very well. And it's now just a case of, can he get even more, having he's totaled over 10,000 damage and just over 10.5 if you take into account that 320 assistance that he's managed to do as well. Unfortunately the SU did hide for the entire game, which is, I don't even know, I would have tried to get some more damage if I was in the SU. But there you go, a fantastic result, pulling off in a tank that definitely isn't used to having results like that. So let's jump into the next one, see how else you can carry in a different tank. So we go from one of the older tanks in the game to one of the newer tier 9s in the game, which is the Chieftain Proto. Now of course this has been around for a little bit, it was recently put on sale, and of course that's why we're showcasing it, because although it is a decent tank, it's definitely no amazing Chieftain, and of course he's certainly nothing on the Chieftain T95 at tier 10, but what this thing can do is be very, very powerful. And you can see here the really good spot at the beginning of the game, if you have the speed that this tank definitely does, to be able to get here. You can spot opponents making the cross, you can get assistance damage on the heavies that make this way, and of course your TDs that are up here potentially can get side shots on these guys. He's using the bushes to get some free spotting on them, and of course manages to spot the T95 camping at the back. He gets a free shell of damage onto the IS-6B. There, of course, pre-aiming this location is a common place, but it's definitely one that you can get a lot of damage in, and I highly recommend you guys try it if you're in a tank that has some decent turret armor. And of course, although this tank doesn't have the best turret armor and can be penned quite easily through the cupola and some of the cheeks if you're coming up against those heavily well, high penetration tank destroyers, it's still a very, very good spot at this point in the game. Now what you can do is you can actually come up that slope just slightly to be able to then get enough gun depression. You don't have to go all the way up the slope, but it just allows you to get that little bit of gun depression whilst also being able to open up some shots. And you can see he is just ploughing rounds into this IS-3-2. He's not having the best day, and that is exactly what you want to be seeing. You're seeing him just constantly poking this, keeping the opponents lit, seeing what they're doing, and this is what the best players will do and how they can do it in tanks that generally aren't really that amazing in the game, and how they can come out with results like we've been seeing in that first replay replay and of course what we're going to see in this one. The other great thing about pushing yourself up that slope is it actually angles the turret and of course the hull armor slightly up, which allows you to block even more damage, and hence why he's been able to block 3.4k in a tank that generally doesn't actually have that good of an armor for a tier 9 heavy tank. So he's been easily working this ridgeline, just taking out tanks left, right and centre. He's picked up the IS-3-2. He's also picked up the IS-3 who are camping over here. And of course now it's time for the E-100. But this is the problem with this tank, is that the penetration, although being fairly decent, is a little bit annoying to be able to reliably pen the E-100. He goes for the vision bar of the E-100, which of course is a pen, but of course a very slim shot. So a bit lucky that that managed to hit, but still, knowing the weak points, came out with a decent result. But as you'll be seeing in this game, the game is not looking all too good. It appears like he has basically been the only one on his team really doing anything, and that's because the team are down by 8,000 hit points. It's really not great, and you can see he's picked up 5,000 of the hit points that he's dealt to the enemy team. And you can see here he's been able, because of the E-100's lack of vision and because he's using the bush that's actually behind the or in front of the E-100, it effectively counts as a double bush, because he's using the bush in front of him and he's also then using the bush that the E-100's behind. And since there aren't the IS-3 and the IS-3-2 on the enemy team, it allows him to get some easy shots. And you can see here once again managing to hit the E4, and the best thing is he's not even getting spotted at this point from using this location. You can see it's just a perfect example of how broken this position can be on Serene Coast, and why you want to be using it if you can and you have a hold down heavy. And of course you can get into this location quick enough in the beginning of the game where you're not taking any shots from making the cross initially. So the E-100 actually exposes his lower plate there, which allows him to get a easy shot up into it, and that is a super nice play. And you've just been seeing a perfect example in this replay of what you can do from a position like that and how influential some of these positions really are. You can see the E-100 obviously not quite knowing what day of the week it is, and he plows one straight into the side of the turret. Easy win. And the E4 has made the mistake of pushing over here as well. He's soon going to be finding he's going to be in the exact same position that the E-100, the IS-3 and the IS-3-2 were in. Now, what you saw there was the 704, of course, finding it difficult to use his position. It isn't the best position for a tank destroyer. You've got to have gun depression, otherwise you're going to have to actually poke over the hill, and that is not the ideal. Now, the T-95, of course, knows his position. He doesn't appear to be spotted at this point. He takes 2 shells, but as with experienced players knowing in this game that if you take the shells, they can't fire again. So he just accepts the fact that he's taken a shell and then deals 2 shots back to the opponents, which is absolutely fine, even if you have lost a ton of hit points there with the E4 and of course the T-95 hitting you, losing 1,500 total. But with the Lorraine 50T, it has to become a point at which you just have to take those lucky shots, or at least try and poke the damage out, because if you don't, you're going to be finding yourself in a sticky situation where essentially you've got a few tanks in front of you that are all just going to swarm you, and if you aren't consistently dealing damage, or at least attempting to, then you're just going to be in the back end of the game and back in the garage pretty quickly. Now, this position once again very good, because what you can do here is you can spot for your team. The T-30 has an easy shot into the E4, so if they try and actually push you, it's very defensible. The only position you have to be careful of is if you back up to this location here, where the enemy tanks in the bushes over here can get a side shot into you, which is of course where the downfall of most players go when they try and poke this side. But because the enemy team are winning, or were winning so hard, it appears like they've just completely forgotten about making sense, and they've just been YOLOing in one by one, and that has allowed the Chieftain Proto to have such a good game. Now, one of the best things about the Chieftain Proto is its HE rounds, because it does get 120 pen on them, and that allows you to rinse through lightly armoured vehicles like the FV4005, and because you have that good accuracy and good mobility, you can poke out and deal damage quite easily, and they're not really going to be able to do a whole lot against you. And you can see here he's picked up, what, 1,000 damage in just 2 shells with that high alpha damage on those premium rounds, or the HE rounds even, with a 500 315 average damage on this thing, so he's been able to really hold back these opponents, combined with the fact that he has his T30 in support, and essentially the both of them are creating this lovely crossfire which you can do. And if you signal to your teammates to get into a position up here so that you will spot for them and they can just get shots into them, it makes it so good. You can see here the T95 did fire, he knows the reload of the T95, pokes it, easy damage right there. Now, the problem comes is when team opponents actually push this location here, because what happens is that the T30 no longer has an easy shot until they're right up next to you. And when they do get right up next to you, they're going to be constantly proxying you. But luckily for him, he does shut down the turreted tank, and now it's just a case of finding the rear of the T95, who's way overcommitted here. Finds that weak point, can he get it? He tracks him up in the air, allowing him to give him a bit of breathing space and just decide what he wants to do next. The T30 is coming in to try and help him here. He's going to go for that cupola. It bounces. Oh no, not an ideal scenario there. And the T95 is just going to try and steamroll his way in, but the T30 swoops in from behind, finishing him off, and that is an amazing play on this side of the map to come out with 10,400 damage, but with only a minute on the clock. The game doesn't end how you'd want it. And that's because with him doing all of the work on that flank and the team really sucking, to be honest with you, he ends up with a draw because they just didn't deal with the tanks on this flank, and unfortunately doesn't come away with a win, but it is an exact example of how you can play that position. Let's jump into another replay. Now the 277 is a good heavy tank. It's nothing fantastic, it's not excellent, it is by no means a brilliant tank that is capable of dealing with, for example, two Object 279Es, but this replay might just change your mind about this tank, and it is definitely a well-performing tank if you can get it in the right location. You can see here, he's taken this early position using the mobility of the Object 277 to get hold down here, which is what you want to be doing, and that allows you to get 3 shots of damage. It is yet again a brilliant early game position to farm up opponents. The only problem with this position really in this game is that if the opponents get up into this central location over here, it can be a little bit difficult because they can get shots down into you, and that can be a problem. But luckily at the beginning of this game no one's managed to make that play, and it is now time for those heat rounds, where this tank's heat rounds being pretty decent. 340 pen allows you to really deal with the Object 279E, and even Jaegerus are going to struggle to easily pen the turret of this tank, and especially with the accuracy that those tanks have to reliably hit the top of the turret or somewhere of that like and get a flush shot into you. And at this point you can just literally poke this corner, and that is an excellent play. It's super easy to get some nice shots of damage into these opponents, and unfortunately for the 279E, who obviously thought he'd bought the best tank, or at least got the best tank in the game at this tier, or at least the easiest carry, yeah, I mean, heat is just rinsing straight through the front of him, and this is exactly what you want to be seeing, and yeah, especially in a tech tree vehicle opposed to that broken one. And he has demolished the 279E, which is lovely to see, and it's perfect. I always love to see the 279Es getting punished super hard, and you can see here just easy shots, just poking that ridge, making sure that no one in front of him is opening themselves up to get a shot, and that really allows him to control this flank and deal a ton of damage. 4,500 with the great DPM of the 277 for a heavy tank, and just really ploughing rounds every single time he's reloaded into the heavies that just are trying to make it work. He does get pen there. It looks like it was a shot into the side of the tank here, maybe overexposing, or in fact up into the turret. Not quite sure, but yet again, just takes it calm, knows that he's been penned, but it's okay because it was probably a lucky shot to be able to get him. He's not going to try and run away after being hit once, and he's been just demolishing the team, setting the AMX M4 on fire. Oh, it's just perfect. This position really working out super well. None of the enemy team taking the kind of idea to go up into this location up here to get down shots into him, and he's really controlled this map so far, even if his team are somehow losing. I mean, 6,500 damage by one tank holding off the most broken, and his team are still throwing themselves away. But That means that he's capable of dealing more damage in the game since the enemy teams haven't been farmed by his team. Ah, yes, exactly what you want to see. And this is where the Emil 2 tries to make the good play, which is to go up there, get super annoyed that he doesn't finish off the Emil 2. I'd be annoyed too. And that allows him to escape, which is, it's never good to let a autoloader manage to escape there. But just constantly just trying to peek, even if you don't fully aim, at this point you just got to try and get those shots out. Go for them. You don't want to expose yourself too much. And you can see here, he does fully aim that one, and a shot goes straight in. 7,400 damage. Perfect use of this position. But the game is far from over, and there's some extra things that this player is going to need to do if he wants to win this game. Now then, the one position that can kind of counter this spot if you are trying to make a more aggressive play towards here from this location and trying to get out is where the TVP T5051 is, because they can get some shots down into you from the center of the map at which the enemy team have won, and also you don't want to stay there too long to the point where the enemy team are going to just be able to get into you from straight ahead, and therefore you're not going to be able to get hold down, etc. He tries to go for the shot on the 279E. It's a difficult one. He's really trying to preserve those hit points. He doesn't want to take any more, but decides he's going to go for it anyway, and he shuts down that 279E, knowing full well that once that he's gone, it's free reign for him to make the plays he wants to do. And from this location, rather than turning around and going up, he's going to take the initiative to actually move up from behind the opponents to get some shots into the back of them, put pressure onto them with the Chieftain Proto and the FV4005 on his team up here as well. The Jaegeru obviously in the central location on this area here, trying to get a shot into the base, and this is really where he has to be a little bit careful. The projectile on the enemy team obviously thinking he can make the plays, and he obviously can't when you're crossing an open field. He's got to move forward, keep moving, and that allows him to get a free shot into him. But knowing full well that the enemy team really are in a capable position here, they have surrounded his friendly team. There's no one really opening themselves up except from this BZ, who he lands one into the side of, and this is really where the game starts to get super tense. They could still win this game, but he has to play a perfect round of World of Tanks, and he needs some of his teammates to survive. Can he save the FV4005? Can the Chieftain Proto on the team, like we saw in the previous game, support him here? Can he do it? Now, the Chieftain Proto is getting YOLO'd. He's on a limited amount of hit points. He's only got 10,300 damage done. Well, I say only. It still continues in this game. But with the Progetto, with the TDs in the game, the M103, they're all on huge amounts of hit points still left. 4,500 damage in this game. It's going to have to be a ridiculous one. The EBR, I don't know what he was doing, but that was a happy play indeed. The Progetto catches him in the side. Oh, this is a shambles. Not ideal. Definitely not what you want. Oh no, the autoloading medium tank, the Skoda T50, who apparently doesn't actually have the autoloader, it's obviously a stock version, decides to push from behind, and oh, this is not looking good. The enemy team have noticed that they can go from behind. Can he manage to bounce around from the Skoda? Yes, he can, but the M103's coming, and what do you have to do to win a game of World of Tanks? I mean, he did absolutely everything right, but the team just, once again, not doing everything that they could have done in that game, but still a fantastic result. And hopefully this has shown you some spots that you can use in your tanks, both mediums, heavies, that sort of thing, and hopefully you can use them in your own games to come away with results like this, or at least get somewhat near this results and just have extra positions to utilize. And talking about positions, don't forget to check out this position guide, which is really good for getting easy damage at the beginning of the game. Hopefully you enjoy. Subscribe if you're not, and of course like the video if you did, and I'll see you in the next one coming soon. Goodbye.